Shalom, Kol Halal, Yahawah, Bahasham, Yahawashi, Bahasham, Qadash. Double honors unto the apostles, double honors unto the elder bishops. Salutations to all our fellow laborers doing this work in truth and sincerity, risking their lives and their freedom to do so. Now more so than ever, the 144,000 and the scattered elect that are scattered around the four corners of the earth among the heathens that look like those heathens, and to the few Akwaf that are listening and learning to you, I say Shalom. This is your brother Malcolm coming at you with another lesson, and this is going to be part 2 of that devil means deceiver. And the whole world has been deceived, and through the power of Yahawah, Bahasham, Yahawashi, and through the men of the Lord, starting with the apostle elders of the great millstone on down to the men on the other side of the line and the affiliates. The truth has come back into the world. All right, and what you're looking at is this is Renaissance art. I put in, images of black icons of the Dark Ages, and it gave me the medieval times, which kind of comes close to, the same. The one kind of bled into the other, but this is black musicians in Portuguese painting of engagement of Saints Ursula and Prince Etheris in 1520. These men don't look like slaves, or neither are they in hardcore bondage. And they probably performed and traveled all over the place, and they probably were leaving seed everywhere too. I can guarantee you that. Because when you look at Hollywood, when you look at the movies of the time periods, and in these recent years, they've been showing you the presence of brown-skinned people during these time periods and places. But not what they don't show you is that these people, the majority of people, are actually the ruling class people. Esau, Edom, the so-called white people, or the Cajuns of Call, they didn't come into power until the Renaissance, which means rebirth. All right, so as we go through some of these images, this is Othello, a Moor. All right, he was a general from William Shakespeare's Othello, and may be one of the most famous depictions of black people in medieval Europe history. All right. Now I'm saying this, though it's a fictional character, the basis is actually based upon Capitano Moro, Moorish captain. All right, from the 1500s, and this was written by an Italian writer named Cinthio. So they don't tell you the truth about these things, and as racist as Esau Edom is, you think that Shakespeare's one of his plays would be a play of a Moorish general, a worshiper of Islam, having sexual relations with a white or occasion of call princess or family of nobility? Do you really think so? When you think about how racist they were in the 1800s, in the 1700s, in the early 1900s, with all the hangings and the lynchings after let me let this dog out. Dog thinks he's a person. But as you recall how racist they were, how many men were murdered for having relations with occasions of call women, and looking at them in some cases. That one of the most famous plays ever written would actually portray the sexual relationship between a so-called black man and a so-called white woman. No, Othello, that Shakespeare, there's no way that a white author would have done that, especially in the time span that we're talking about, according to them. The way, So here's the next one of Sybil. All right. And she's supposed to be an ancient goddess, a priestess foretelling the coming great events. All right. And depicts the Sybil and Agrippina, one of the 12 that foretold the coming of Yahawashi. Notice the flagnium and the crown thrones, a symbolic object of reminding the viewer of Yahawashi's suffering, is what the writer wrote about this particular peace. All right. Adam, and it was, but here we go. Adam Jansen's Agrippine Sybil, Netherlands, 1575. Now you have to recall the letter that Edomites like to poke fun of now and try to joke about, saying that, you know, that Benjamin Franklin had temporary insanity when he said that the Swedes, the Germans, the Italians, you know, were black. But here are the artifacts from the time period showing it to be true. All right. Is that Psalms 85 and 11? And I'm going to be reading from the NLT today. I've got a beautiful brother, Kanasala, you know, one of the elder brothers in the camp, gifted me this book. You know, I just said I wanted to go buy one, and he went and bought it for me. So I'm compelled to read it, and though I actually talked about it on the line yesterday, we did a lesson, went in on it, a pretty detailed lesson. That though they tried to hide certain things, especially the scriptures that talk about the color of the Israelites, all those were changed. But then the other scriptures referring to the Israelites makes it clear that salvation is only up for them. All right, which is a point that I'm going to circle back to, because I'm going to read from John the 17th chapter. All right, and prove that, you know, but this is all connected, because this is the missing link of history of the Israelites in their captivity and after they fell and when they were scattered and when they were scattered to. All right, this is Psalms 85 and 11, and it reads, "Truth springs from the earth and righteousness smiles down from heaven." All right, and that truth being all these artifacts that are still around today from the time period which is in controversy. You know, all the videos that I did on the Maccabean Spirit channel, you know, and all the angry cases of call, you know, complaining about stealing their heritage, and you're laughing about, you know, the Irish, the Scots, you know, the Brits, the Danes being people like you looking at on the screen. And it's no laughing matter, because it's absolutely true. Right here we have and so, you know, if their whole thing is, if we don't present this evidence, then, you know, we hide this evidence. They just don't, you know, they don't do it. Then clearly it can't be real, because, you know, but it's real. All right. This is the book, The Negro Question. Just waiting for it to load up. All right. This is the book, The Negro Question, by Lee Cummings. Let's see if I can raise that up. And I'm just going to read from, these are highlighted points in the book from pages 4 and 5. All right. And these are different authors, philanthropists, and historians that spoke about the color of the Israelites. All right. And, you know, and the people in Europe in general. All right. It says, Professor Winchell Alexander, page 4, Our Remote Ancestry, 1815 to 1900. Collection of journals. All right. So he lived from 1815 to 1900. All right. These short black men came from Atlantis, northern Africa, and they overran Europe, and they were known as Britons. All right. Now, where they came from, that part is a false. But they did rule over Britain at the fall of Rome. All right. It says, Roman historian Tacitus, the origins of the Black Britons. All right. The Iberians are black people with curly hair. That will be your Irish. All right. Anthropological Review, Society, London, Volume 8. All right. So why isn't that taught in school? Why is that not, you know, used when you're making time period pieces about Robert the Bruce, you know, and things of that nature? All right. The Outlaw King, which was a great movie. They just didn't have the right people playing the parts of, because the cages of call were in servant status or just being wild in the forest at the time. They were the wildlings. They kind of mixed that wildling history with the Danish, with the Viking history. They run the two together, instead of just telling the truth. That's why the Danish, the Vikings and the Brits and et cetera, eventually made peace. They were the same people. All right. But this is also on page 4, Joseph Riston, The Annals of Chaldean Picts and Scots, volume 2, 7 and 27. Picts, all right, it said, our brown complexion with curly hair. We always tell you that the original inhabitants of Europe were the sons of Japhet, the Picts, and those were your Samoans, your Hawaiians, your Tongans, etc. All right, the Rock's mother's people. All right, because the Rock looks like an ancient Pict, but he's actually a so-called Negro. He's an Israelite. His father was a big muscle-bound Negro. The Rock basically was his father all over again. Just became way more famous. You can look up the Rock's father. His name was Rocky Johnson. All right, and he married a Samoan or Hawaiian woman, and now you have the Rock. All right. Ivan Sertima, African presence in early Europe, pages 225. The Britons look like Ethiopians. I met a very attractive Ethiopian woman just, it's Sunday on this past Tuesday. All right. And it's funny because Ethiopians and other people from that part of the world come to America, people from North Africa, and they actually get labeled as Caucasian, Caucasians of call. So once again, the so-called white man is a deceiver, all right, and a devil, and devil means deceiver. Okay. Here we go. Another one. Albert Churchward, 1912, Origins and Evolution, pages 12 and 13. The black Basque, meaning bodies, were exterminated from Europe. All right. So he's telling you that all over Europe, and Professor Boyd Dawkins, which I'm about to read next, gave you more insight on it. All right, on page 5, Professor Boyd Dawkins, our earliest ancestors, bygone days, a lecture delivered in the public hall, Collinhurst, Manchester, January 8th, 1879. The ancient Britons, this is page 5, Irish, Scots, are short black people, pages 103 to 107. All right. Dr. Thurnham, Nature Journal of Science, page 92. From the evidence at hand, it seems the Iberians, all right, black man, occupied the whole of Western Europe at one time. So it just wasn't the Iberian Peninsula, all right, Portugal, Spain, Ireland, Scotland, all of it. All right, the Netherlands, all those castles that were built by so-called black people, Israelites, that were the ruling class people in Europe for 1,000 years after the fall of Rome up until the Renaissance. And there is hardcore evidence of this, which is why Hollywood whitewashed it in all their movies. Even still, they make so much money off Valhalla and all these Viking movies, etc., etc., but they're all fabricated when it comes to the color of the people. All right? Because racism sprung up here. Professor Huxley, 1870, The Iberian Race, page 332. The Iberian Basque black bones have been found all over Europe with his animals. All right? Basque meaning bodies. All right? And there it is, man. All right, let me read this portion. This is also a one paragraph on page 5, and then we're going to go to the scriptures. But it says, I have inserted the writings of 8 English white historians to show, see, these were all occasions of call. These were all Edomites, at least in appearance. Actually, the Roman historian Tacitus was more likely a Negro than and not because of the time frame. The Israelites, the Negroes, had taken over. And that's when you had your what they They admit it, but they don't, because they'll call them the African Caesars or emperors. They weren't Africans, they were Israelites. You know, they try to pass the Israelites off for being Africans, knowing that Africans are a different race of dark people. All right. And the world is beginning to learn that truth as well. That the Negroes, so-called Negroes who came in for Africa, they weren't Africans at all. They were refugees there. They came from the land of Israel. They were refugees and built all those cities and, you know, all those towns that were developed, you know, from along the Niger River all the way up to Benin. All those castles that were built by these very same people. And you notice the castles that were all throughout Africa, which they don't like to show and pretend that they didn't exist, is to say that they only lived in grass huts. That was the Hamites that lived in grass huts. But even some of the Hamites also have built structures. So, but nevertheless, if you see some of these castles, just like the ones in the fort that the Israelites were sold from, all right, they built the same ways as the castles are in Europe. And the so-called white man builds differently. You know, he builds with carved, rounded stone with pillars, you know, like in Mount Seir and Petra. All right, but it says, I have inserted the writings of 8 white historians to show you that our white brothers who were closer to an epicenter didn't have a problem telling the truth about the origin inhabitants of Europe. Why? Because they were proud of them conquering them. So the thought to lie and change who they were and all that hadn't come yet, you know, as far as films and books, because the average Negro couldn't even read during the time that all these authors were, you know, were writing, you know, and making these books and all these entries. It says these Welshmen, Britons, Irish, Frenchmen, Russians, Germans, Italians, Swedes, same thing as Benjamin Franklin said, and you had cases of Carl laughing about it, saying that he was, you know, high on something, or when he wrote that, when he said that. Everything else he did, though, he was legit and an American hero, an Edomite hero, except for that letter. All right, but it says thousands of years before the English arrived in 449 AD, and this will be proven by the writings of Professor Boyd Dawkins, Professor of Geology at Manchester University, London. Professor Boyd Dawkins was invited to speak in a public hall at Manchester Hall in January 18th, 1879. And basically, Professor Boyd Dawkins, his findings, his studies prove that what the Israelites teach on the highways and byways is 100% absolutely true. All right? And that Edom is a deceiver. So, let's go to some history, all right, in the Maccabees to set the stage, right, before we read the reading of John, which will probably be done in part 3. You know, Lord's will, I'll get to the John, all right, in part 3, definitely. So, but let's go to the Maccabees and let's just read First Maccabees. All right, so this is First Maccabees 1 and 11, and it reads, and in those days went there out of Israel wicked men who persuaded many, saying, let us go up and make a covenant with the heathen that are round about, for since we departed from them, we have had much sorrow. So this device pleased them well. Then certain of the people were so forward herein that they went to the king, who gave them license to do after the ordinances of the heathen, whereupon they built a place of exercise at Jerusalem according to the customs of the heathen. All right. It says, because it's not going off building a place of exercise. They built it according to the customs of the heathen. All right. And made themselves uncircumcised and forsook the holy covenant and joined themselves to the heathen and were sold to do mischief. So, you know, we've always had that 2/3 renegade rebellious elements among us. All right. And one of the things that they did was they were going off. They were working out naked. That's how they became uncircumcised. I forget the terminology. Apostle Ramlad spoke on it about 3 or 4 days ago. How, you know, Jake would sew the foreskin back onto their rods to work out naked. And that's why they worked out naked, to prove that they weren't circumcised. Why? Because it became against the law for an Israelite to refer to himself as so. To refer to yourself as a Judite or a Benjamite or a Levite or whatever of the other tribes that you were from. All right. And this very important detail in history is left out in Christianity. All right. They go right from the Babylonian captivity. All right. And then they jump straight to Rome. All right. And just completely skipping over the Grecian captivity. And the Romans are extended from the Grecians. But this Grecian activity, what happened, is very important because that's when the Israelites became Hellenized, when they became Greeks. Why you get the confusion when you read Acts, you know, when you read scriptures like when it says there's no difference between neither Greek nor Jew. And there's 1,000 lessons done by the great millstone proving that point, that was talking about the Israelite foreigners who were speaking Greek. All right. Because those people were called Hellenists. Acts 6:1 is a perfect example of that. Acts 9:29. You know, I've probably done at least 10 videos over the years, over probably the last 5 or 6 years on that subject matter alone. All right. Acts 6:1 and Acts 9:29. You can go read those on your own. They refer, you know, it says there's differences between, you know, grievances, roughly paraphrased, between the Hebrews and the Grecians. But those Grecians were Hellenized Israelites who followed after the Greek customs and spoke Greek. Their children even had Greek names. That's how you got people like Timothy and Cornelius. All right, which is going to be very important, having the understanding that I'm giving now, going into the next lesson. So jumping up to 1 Maccabees 1:41, it says, moreover, King Antiochus wrote to the whole of his kingdom that all should be one people and everyone should leave his laws. So all the heathen agreed to the commandment of the king. And so they became a metropolis like New York. All right. And all these melanated people were there, and the Israelites and the Edomites all just dwelling together. All right. With the Edomites in charge, of course, you know, because they love to bring everybody together, but they have to be the people in charge. And it says, yeah, many also of the Israelites consented to the religion and sacrificed unto idols and profaned the Sabbath. For the kings had sent letters by messengers unto Jerusalem and the cities of Judah that they should follow the strange laws of the land. All right. And it says, and it forbid the burnt offerings and sacrifices and drink offerings in the temple, that they should profane the Sabbath and festival days and pollute the sanctuary and holy people. Set up altars and groves and chapels of idols, and sacrifice swine's flesh and unclean beasts, that they should leave their children uncircumcised, make their souls abominable with all manner of uncleanness and profanation, to the end that they might forget the law and change all the ordinances. And many of the Israelites consented to this and did this, and this is how they became Grecians and Greeks. They became Hellenized heathens. All right? And we're going to talk about, you know, and we're going to marry this lesson right to John 3:16 and then to John the 17th chapter. Who is it talking about? Because the Lord came back for those Hellenized and scattered Israelites among the heathens that looked like the heathens. All right. So we're going to go into that in part 3, Lord's will. Until the next lesson, Shalom, Kwam Yasharallah.